Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fresh, your host. I'll be with you for the next hour. You're listening to LibertyRadioLive.com. Thanks for tuning in this morning, and good morning to my friends in Fresno, California, Pine Hill, New Mexico, San Antonio, Texas, Cumberland, Wisconsin, Guelph, Ontario. Welcome to my Canadian listeners this morning. And also Adelston, Surrey, and other places around the world. Welcome to Inquisition Update. We're continuing our reading and discussion of the book, The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. Talking still further, expanding our understanding of the consequences of the donation of Constantine, a forgery which forms the basis for what we know today as the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, and its growing and expanding global kingdom. It's called the New World Order. It's nothing new. It's just the old world order on steroids. It's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and this author's helping us understand its beginnings. Now, yesterday, before the end of the broadcast, we were talking about some crusades, papal proxy wars, where the papacy causes nations to go to war in the Roman Catholic Church's behalf to conquer more lands and to gain more riches, more power, and more influence for the papacy to expand the global sovereignty of the Pope. And one of these crusades, particularly discussed yesterday, was the Franco-Venetian Crusade of 1202 A.D., where the Pope planned to annex the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire is the new stomping grounds for Constantine, Emperor Constantine. When he left Rome, left his power and his senate and his scepter and his jurisdiction and all to the Pope of Rome, he went to Byzantium. Now, Rome is asserting itself in Constantine's domain. Now, remember, it was the donation of Constantine that forms the basis for the authority of the papacy. Now the papacy is taking over the land of Constantine's stomping ground. It says a Latin empire came into being in the East. I'm talking about this Byzantium Empire. A Latin kingdom replaced it. And while the Byzantines became the temporal vassals of the Pope, the Greek Orthodox Church, that church of Constantine, it's called the Greek Orthodox Church, was compelled to acknowledge Roman supremacy. Later on, such immense dominion was extended by his successors through the conversion to Roman Catholicism of the pagans of the Baltic. So that's how the Orthodox Church was regarded by the papacy. Pagans. And this is a perfect example of Rome's standard operating practice, and that is to conquer a land and to make Roman Catholicism the religion of the country that it conquers. Now, this still goes on today. It's going on right now, right here in the United States of America. The only difference being there's no resistance to this papal kingdom, this Latin kingdom that is now usurping itself over our republic. What we're experiencing now is a peaceable conversion to Roman Catholicism through the ecumenical movement. You know, the fisherman has come, and he's fishing for Protestants. And the Protestants are biting the hook. But at some point, the fishing's not going to be too good. God's people are simply not going to go back to Rome. those of us who understand what the Roman Catholic Church represents in the world, the biblical Antichrist, we're not going. And that's when Rome, as typical throughout history, begins to use the sword. It's called Inquisition. It's called conquest. It's called forced, coercive conversion to the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what she did to the Byzantines, to the Greek Orthodox Church, that Church of Constantine. And she's going to do the same thing here in this country. That's why this program is called Inquisition Update. Now, none of us have any right to expect that the Roman Catholic Church won't do the same thing in this country that she's done in every country since her founding. Forced, coercive conversion to the Roman Catholic Church. You can either do it willingly through the ecumenical movement, or you can do it by force through concentration camps, re-education centers, forced labor camps, or the guillotine, or any of the other high-tech methods they have of forcibly converting someone to Catholicism, and if you don't, you'd simply be destroyed. Now, at this time, as in the past, one country more than any other opposed the irresistible ecclesiastical, that is the church, absorption. The irresistible absorption by the Roman Catholic Church. And that was the powerful German Empire. But the Pope, says this author, in spite of many setbacks, never recognized Germany as being outside of his formidable papal imperium, his formidable papal empire, on the familiar ground that she was an integral, that is, the German Empire was an integral part of the patrimony of St. Peter. In other words, the father of the church, the so-called father of this Roman Catholic Church, Peter, gave to the Pope, his successor, not just what was conquered during the Crusades, but also Germany. And can't you imagine what is going to go through Peter's mind when he's raised from the dust of the ground and glorified by his Christ and sees the crimes, the inconceivable crimes that the Pope has done to the world in his name? And the same might be said of the mother of Jesus, Mary. What crimes, lies, and distortions have been done in the world by the papacy in her name. Anyway, continuing with the donation of Constantine, it says, not content with the donation of Constantine. No, the Pope's never content. Not content with the donation of Constantine, Pope Innocent IV asserted that what Constantine gave to the church had not belonged to him at all. For Europe had always belonged to the church. That's what they said. And said in an encyclical published shortly after the close of the Council of Lyons in 1245 AD, Pope Innocent expressly stated, quote, listen to this, "It is wrong to show ignorance of the origin of things and to imagine that the Apostolic See's rule over secular matters dates only from Constantine. Before him, this power was already in the Holy See. Constantine merely resigned into the hands of the Roman Catholic Church a power, quote, which he used without right when he was outside her pale." In other words, Constantine used a power which did not belong to him because he was not inside the Roman Catholic Church at the time. It says, once admitted, continuing with the quote, it says, once admitted into the church, he obtained, by the concession of the Vicar of Christ, the Pope, authority which only then became legitimate. So now they're repudiating Constantine's authority to even issue this donation of Constantine, whereas before, all of the papacy's expressed increase in power and influence in the world was based on the donation of Constantine. See, Rome's having it both ways. That's typically the way she operates. She has it both ways. Now, after which, in the same encyclical, Pope Innocent fondly dwelt upon the idea that the Pope's acceptance of the Constantine donation was but a visible sign of the Pope's sovereign dominion over the whole world, and hence of all the wealth to be found on the earth. Did you hear that? He has sovereign dominion over the whole world, even where you live, and he has control or divine right to the wealth to be found everywhere on earth. That's the New World Order. That's where we're going. That's where we are today. They just don't admit it. The people are kept ignorant of all this. Now it continues, it says, belief in the donation of Constantine and in the wide extent of territory which Constantine included in it grew even stronger. Gratian himself did not include it, but it was soon asserted as Pallia, and thus found an entry into all schools and canonical jurisprudence, so that from this time on the lawyers were most influential publishers and defenders of the fiction. The donation of Constantine, the fiction. So it's being promoted all over the world as literal fact. And it says, the language of the popes also was henceforth more confident. You know, if you're paying attention, it becomes impressive that all of this is just simply trying to convince the Pope how much power he has. And that's what it is. Now, this paragraph ends with a Latin expression. I did my best to interpret it. I won't read it because my Latin is lousy. But what it amounts to is the Pope has the power to bequeath all of his power and authority and territory and wealth to his successors. Okay, as the Pope is the successor of Peter, and all that is in the realm of Peter is passed on to each papal successor. That's what it amounts to. So this is an empire that will never end. That is, of course, until Christ puts an end to it. The real Christ, who has no vicar on earth, but the Spirit of Christ. And he is opposed to the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church. It is his antithesis, the biblical Antichrist. Now, Gregory the Ninth, 1227 to 1241, Pope Gregory the Ninth followed this out to its consequences in a way surpassing anything that had been done before, when he represented to the Emperor Frederick II that Constantine had, along with the imperial insignia, given over Rome with the duchy and the imperium to the care of the popes forever. And whereupon the popes, without diminishing in any degree whatsoever the substance of their jurisdiction, established the tribunal of the empire, transferred it to the Germans, and were wont to concede the power of the sword to the emperors at their coronation. In other words, they desired to confer upon the emperor the power of the sword at their crowning. So what we have now is a creation of a papal proxy warrior. You receive your crown, your empire, and the sword from the church. The Roman Catholic Church. And it says, by now, this was as much as to say that this imperial authority had its sole origin in the popes. That is, the crown and the sword. It gets all of its authority, its origin, from the popes. And that could be enlarged or narrowed at their good pleasure. At the Pope's good pleasure, he can take your crown, he can take your sword, he can give the crown back to you, he can give the sword back to you, he can command you to go to war in the name of religion, conquer more lands for the Pope, and punish you if you don't. Literally, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He may narrow or enlarge the power of the king at his good pleasure, and that the Pope could call each emperor to account for the use of the power and the riches entrusted to him by the Pope. Now he's the judge of the king. You see the Pope's hair getting bigger by the day? And it says, but the highest rung of the ladder was yet not reached. It was first achieved by Gregory's successor, Innocent IV, when at the Synod of Lyons resulted in the deposition of Frederick. In other words, he deposed him, removed his crown. I mean, after all, if the Pope has the authority to crown a king, certainly by extrapolation you have to understand that the Pope can withdraw that crown at any time. And this was the first demonstration of this power to depose kings in the case of Frederick. It says, this deposition of Frederick, in which act this Pope went beyond all his predecessors in the increase of his claim and the extent of the authority of Rome. Now, it's a fact of life now. The Pope has defined himself as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He can seat and unseat kings. And this isn't something that's been lost to the Middle Ages. No, this is practiced today. The donation of Constantine has never been renounced. All the kings of the earth, you go to my webpage, and take a look at the links on you'll see demonstrations, photographs of all the kings of the earth bowing before the papacy and kissing his ring. Now, you simply have to ask yourself, if this is not a reality in the world today, why are all the kings of the earth going to the Pope to kiss his ring? It's ridiculous. No, this is the demonstration of what remains of the strength and power of the papacy that originates from the donation of Constantine. He is the facts on the ground, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, because all the kings of the earth and all the lords of the earth go to him to kiss his ring. They get their power and strength from him, not Christ. They get their power and strength from the Antichrist, not from Christ. That includes the President of the United States. The President of the United States gets out of line, he becomes a John F. Kennedy. Barack Obama, the same way. If he ever defies the papacy, he's toast. His own Secret Service will take him out. Now, it says the Dominican Ptolomeo Luca, a Dominican monk, a theologian, Ptolomeo of Luca, author of the two last books of the work De Regimini Principum, the first two books of which were written by the angelic doctor of the Roman Catholic Church, I'd call him the demonic doctor of the Roman Catholic Church, Thomas Aquinas, went even further and explained the donation of Constantine as a formal abdication of Constantine in the favor of Pope Sylvester. Connecting with this other historical circumstances, which were either inventions or misconceptions, he thence drew the conclusion that the power and wealth of all temporal princes derived its strength and efficacy solely from the spiritual power of the popes. There was no halting halfway. Immediately afterwards, in the contest of Boniface VIII with Philip of France, the Augustinian monk Aegidius Colonna of Rome, whom the Pope had nominated to the Archbishopric of Bourges, drew the natural conclusion without the slightest disguise in a work which he dedicated to his patron. The other theologians of the papal court, Agostino Triunfo, the names are new to me, and Alvaro Pelayo surpassed all previous claims and declared that if an emperor like Constantine had given temporal possessions to Pope Sylvester, the first recorded pope of the Roman Catholic Church, this was merely a restitution of what had been stolen in an unjust, tyrannical way. In other words, the only way Constantine could have given anything to the popes is if he had stolen it in the first place, because it always belonged to the popes. More ridiculousness, right? Rome's having it both ways. And it says, emperors and kings were compelled very often not only to acknowledge such claims as true, but to swear that they would defend them with their swords, the papal proxy warriors. To cite only one example, the oath which Henry the VII had to take before his coronation. Pope Clement IV made this monarch swear that he would protect and uphold all the rights which the emperors, beginning with Constantine, had granted to the Roman Catholic Church, without, however, stating what these rights were. Okay, so there's a price to pay when you want to be crowned by the Pope, and he requires you to take an oath to uphold the power of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, it continues, it says, the power given by the donation of Constantine to the Roman Catholic Church was further enhanced by that inherent in the papacy itself. As the direct successors of Peter, the popes were the only true inheritors of the might of the Roman Catholic Church, and hence of whatever and whoever were under her authority. The theory ran as follows, quote, Christ is the Lord of the whole world. At his departure, he left his dominion to his representatives, Peter, and his successors, the popes. Therefore, the fullness of all spiritual and temporal power and dominion, the union of all rights and privileges, lies in the hands of the Pope. Every monarch, even the most powerful, possesses only so much power and territory as the Pope has transferred to him or finds good to allow him, unquote. So now you should be getting a pretty good idea of how the papacy sees itself. And it still sees itself this way today. Now, this theory was supported by those medieval theologians. You remember the ones that are always trying to outdo each other as to determine how much power the Pope really has. Okay? It said it became a firm belief of the popes themselves. In 1245, for instance, Pope Innocent IV expounded this doctrine to none other than the Emperor Frederick, saying that as it was Christ who had entrusted to Peter and his successors both powers, the sacerdotal and the royal, that is the church and the state, the reign of both kingdoms, the heavenly and the earthly, belonged to him, the Pope, by which he meant the spiritual dominion of the papacy had to have its counterpart also in papal dominion over all lands, territories, and riches of the entire world. There's your new world order. All power over all kings, all lands, and all riches. Here we have, finishing the chapter, in 1245 A.D., Pope Innocent IV expounding his doctrine to none other than the most powerful king in Europe at the time, Emperor Frederick, saying that he, being entrusted by Peter, was the successor of him and Christ, and that he had dominion over the priestly and the secular power. That's church state. The Pope has power over the church and the state, reigning both kingdoms, the heavenly and the earthly, which belong to him and him alone, the Pope. and that the papacy has full dominion over all lands, territories, and riches of the entire world. 1245, Pope Innocent IV. And it says, not even the most ambitious emperors of the ancient pagan Roman Empire had ever dared to claim as much. So we have the full growth of the papacy, and it's going to continue to grow. In chapter 5, it's entitled, The Church Claims Ownership of All Islands and Lands As Yet Undiscovered. This book is going to affect you now. This is where you come in. It says, following claims with deeds. In other words, the Pope always puts his words into action. Following claims with deeds, the Pope set about implementing their new astounding theory by word, diplomacy, cunning, threats, and ruthless action. While appealing for support, armed with all the mystic and spiritual authority of the Roman Catholic Church, they went on stating, asserting, and declaring that their rights were based upon the utmost legality by virtue of the donation of Constantine. It was, in fact, a clause in the fabulous donation of Constantine, or rather a couple of sentences as interpreted by them, that is, the priests and the popes and the theologians, which, although seemingly at first sight insignificant, had the most tragic and far-reaching consequences. The words in the last clause of the donation of Constantine, quote, Constantine gives up the remaining sovereignty over Rome, and then it ends with this clause, or the western regions, to Pope Sylvester and his successors, unquote. This became the foundation stones upon which the papacy demanded sovereignty not only over practically the whole of Europe, but over all the islands of the oceans. As in the case of their claims for Europe, this, for the islands, grew with the passing years and the increase of the political power of the popes. It all began in a rather hazy fashion and with a comparatively small matter. When the popes proclaimed their sovereignty over Naples, they included the various small islands nearby on the ground that they were possessions of the Roman Catholic Church. Later on, as documented in the Chronicles of the Church by St. Maria del Principio, the popes, after having declared that Constantine gave to St. Peter also all the lands in the sea, said that the papal sovereignty covered the island of Sicily as well. The use of the forged donation of Constantine initiated a new and more definite phase, however, when Pope Urban II claimed possession of Corsica in 1091, deducing Constantine's right to give away the island from the strange principle that all islands were legally juris publici and therefore state domain. When the popes, after having abstained for 189 years from ruling Corsica directly, became strongly political potentates themselves, they had no hesitation to ask for their island back. In 1077, Pope Gregory VII simply declared that the Corsicans were, quote, ready to return under the supremacy of the papacy, unquote. On this notion, that it was the islands especially that Constantine had given to the popes, they proceeded to build, although nothing had been said in the original document, and with a bold leap, the donation of Constantine was transferred from Corsica to the far west, that is, to Ireland, with the result that soon the papal chair claimed possessions of an island which the Romans themselves had never possessed. See? The whole world belongs to the Pope, not just the old Roman Empire. Even the islands of the sea, even Ireland, and we're just getting started. It says, from then onwards, by virtue of the donation of Constantine, the popes loudly claimed to be the feudal lords of all the islands of the ocean, and started to dispose of them according to their own will, laboring to obtain papal supremacy. They used these rights as a powerful political bargaining power by which to further their political dominion over Europe. A, by compelling kings to acknowledge them as their masters. B, by granting to such kings dominion over lands of which the papacy claimed ownership. And C, by making the spiritual and political, that is the church-state dominion of the Roman Catholic Church, supreme in the lands, thus let to the friendly nations. In other words, thus leased to the friendly nations and kings. It's not over yet, folks. It won't be over till Christ returns. That's the point of all this. And it says the most famous example of such a bargain and transfer is undoubtedly Ireland. Ireland had been for some time the prey of internecine or civil wars, which were steadily but surely bringing it to a total state of quandary. In 1170, in fact, she had already had 61 kings. So there'd been a lot of trouble in Ireland, right? It has to be brought under control. Okay? Here's where the Pope enters stage right. It says, it also happened that the popes, having decided to bring the Irish among them, decided to bring the Irish among them were many pagan and ungodly and rebellious rulers, it said, under the stern hand of the Mother Church, planned a grand strategy, thanks to which they would not only impose the discipline of their religious system, but also tie to the papacy more firmly than ever the English kingdom by conferring upon the English monarch the sole right to conquer that island and subjugate its people. Okay, here we have the creation of a papal proxy warrior. The Pope is going to use England, crown the king, make him his servant, and then tell him, go conquer Ireland for the Pope. Okay, the English king is going to succumb to flattery, just like Pepin and just like Charlemagne is going to succumb to the flattery of the papacy, going to take his crown from the Pope, and then he's going to become a vassal of the Pope, and then he's going to be empowered by the Pope to conquer more land for the Pope, Ireland. It says, in this way, the popes would achieve several goals simultaneously. They would reimpose their authority on Ireland, strengthen their power over the English kingdom, and thus also reinforce their hold upon France and indirectly upon the whole of Europe. It so happened that the English kings had entertained similar designs, and also that at the time there was sitting in the papal chair a man by the name of Nicholas Breakspere, known as Hadrian IV, an Englishman from 1154 to 1159, who made possible the English subjugation of Ireland by his Anglicana Affectione, as an Irish chieftain declared in 1316 in a letter to Pope John the 22nd. King and Pope began to negotiate. The Pope was ready to confer the dominion of Ireland upon the English king upon the condition that the king accepted the doctrine of papal sovereignty, which implied that, as King of England, he was a vassal to the Pope. The king, on the other hand, was ready to accept this upon the condition that the papacy would support him in his military and political conquest of the Irish by using the powerful machinery of the church. That's the case of the United States today. The President of the United States gets his power from the Pope. He gets his presidential office from the power of the Pope. He has to agree to serve the Roman Catholic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church guarantees him that they will help him in their conquest of further lands for the Pope. And that's what this papal proxy war is. This United States papal proxy war is against the Muslims, the heretic Muslims. It's going on today. Not a thing has changed. All we have to do to understand is we just simply plug and chug. we plug the United States into the position of Great Britain at this time. Great Britain conquered Ireland for the Pope. The United States is conquering the Muslims for the Pope. It's a Holy Roman Crusade. And it says, fortune seemed to favor the project, for Diarmait, an Irish potentate years before Henry became King of England, had brought him a long-desired opportunity by proposing the conquest of Ireland. Once the Pope and the King were in agreement, Pope Hadrian IV granted to the English king the hereditary lordship of Ireland, sending a letter with a ring as a symbol of investiture, thus conferring to him dominion over the island of Ireland, which, quote, like all Christian islands, undoubtedly belonged of right to St. Peter and the Roman Catholic Church. So the Pope's going to give Britain the right to subjugate Ireland and to rule Ireland in the Pope's behalf. And now it says the papal grant made in 1155 was kept a secret until after Henry landed in Ireland in 1172. That's right, the Pope doesn't have to announce ahead of time what he's doing. So it's up to us to know ahead of time what he's doing. And the only way we can know ahead of time what the Pope is doing is to study what he did in the past, and that's the very reason for reading this book. And it says, thus the English received dominion over Ireland on the grounds that the pontiffs, the popes, were feudal lords of all islands of the ocean, thanks to the donation of Constantine. Now, the Irish conquest, ordered by Pope Hadrian IV, is authenticated by a document popularly called the Bull Laudabiliter, found only in the Roman Bullarium, that is the Library of the Bulls, and in the Annals of Baronius, but its authenticity has been accepted by Roman Catholic and Protestant historians alike. Now I want to ask you something. If the throne of the Pope is a fiction, based on a lie and a forgery called the donation of Constantine, what consequence is he in the world? Nothing. And his bulls mean nothing. There isn't a bull, not one single bull in the entire library of the bulls that's worth the paper it's written on. And yet here we have the revelation from this author that Protestant historians recognize this bull. Are they Protestant? If they recognize any word or any bull from the Pope? The Pope has no thunder. And what business does a Protestant historian have to acknowledge a bull of the Pope if he be called a Protestant? None. But it says the Bull Laudabiliter is inserted in the Expugnatio Hibernica of Giraldus Gambrensis, published in or about 1188, wherein he asserts it to be the document brought from Rome by John of Salisbury in 1155. He also gives with it a confirmation by Alexander II, obtained, he states, by Henry II after his visit to Ireland. John of Salisbury, the intimate friend and confidant of Pope Hadrian, quotes also the donation of Constantine on the grounds of his right of St. Peter over all islands. In addition to these two documents, there are 3 letters from Alexander III, which, similarly known to us only at second hand, being transcribed in what is known as the Black Book of the Exchequer. In them, the Pope expresses his warm approval of Henry's conquest of Ireland, calling his expedition a missionary enterprise. Oh, what a terrible word. We have to learn a new word, missionary exercise. Look, anytime Rome begins a missionary enterprise, soon to follow is complete subjugation of the land, its riches, its people, and the forced imposition of Roman Catholicism. It says, in them the Pope expressed his warm approval of Henry's conquest of Ireland, calling his expedition a missionary enterprise, praising him as a champion of the Roman Catholic Church and particularly of St. Peter and of his rights, which rights St. Peter passed on to the popes. Especially significant is the fact that the rights claimed by the popes under the donation of Constantine over all islands are here asserted not so much as justifying the grant of Ireland to Henry, but as the entitling of the papal see to claim those rights for itself. In other words, this is a dogma in the Roman Catholic Church that the Pope can determine his own jurisdiction. Just like Christ, he may determine for himself, as it pleases him, his jurisdiction. Those territories over which he has control. And we've already talked about his jurisdiction over the earth and heaven, haven't we? So it's just reiteration of what we've already talked about. And it says such rights were still claimed by the Vatican in an official document as recently as 1645, when in that year Pope Innocent X dispatched Rinuccini as papal nuncio to Ireland. He gave him formal instructions in which were included a brief outline of past events. In it we find this definite and most striking passage. Quote, for a long period the true faith, that is Roman Catholicism, maintained itself till the country, invaded by Danes and idolatrous people, fell for the most part into impious superstition. This state of darkness lasted till the reigns of Adrian IV and Henry II, King of England. Unquote. So you've been nothing but a pagan nation until we took you over. And it says, Henry desired to strengthen his empire, to secure the provinces which he possessed beyond the sea in France, wished to subdue the island of Ireland, and to compass this design had to recourse to Adrian, who himself an Englishman, with a liberal hand granted all he coveted. The zeal manifested by Henry to convert all Ireland to the faith moved the soul of Pope Adrian to invest him with the sovereignty of that island. 3 important conditions were annexed to the gift. Remember, this is the gift. The Pope's going to give the King of England sovereignty over Ireland, but it has a catch. 3 of them, as a matter of fact. Number 1, that the king should do all in his power to propagate the Catholic religion throughout Ireland. So here's the forced conversion of the Irish to Roman Catholicism. Number 2, that each of his subjects should pay an annual tribute of 1 penny to the Holy See, commonly called Peter's Pence. Today you pay Peter's Pence through the federal income tax system. And it says, number 3, that all the privileges and immunities of the Roman Catholic Church be held inviolate. They cannot be violated. And that's why the Roman Catholic Church has sovereignty, independence, tax-free status, and it controls the civil power in this country through the diocesan priests. So nothing's changed, and we're just, learning from history, learning how to see that the same dominion exists in our country today. And it says these conditions were obtained through papal authority and the king's sword. It says, when King Henry seemed to have firmly established himself on Irish soil, the Pope strengthened him by mobilizing the Irish Church in his support, the Irish Roman Catholic Church in his support. That's what they're going to do in this country. When they get ready to really take over, the Roman Catholic Church is going to be deputized by the Pope to help kill the Protestants and forcibly convert us to Catholicism. Those who haven't gone willingly through the ecumenical movement are going to be forcibly converted. And it says, Christian O'Connorkey, Bishop of Lismore and Papal Legate, presided at the synod, attended by the Archbishop of Dublin, Cashel, and Tuam, their suffragette abbots, and other dignitaries. Henry's sovereignty was acknowledged and constitutions made which drew Ireland closer to Rome than ever. Thus it was one of the ironies of history that Catholic Ireland was sold by the popes themselves to a country destined to become the champion of Protestantism. See, God's not out of this equation yet. Now, while I regard as England not to be a Protestant nation anymore, at one time the Protestants openly rejected the papacy, made the practice of Catholicism illegal in their land, kicked out all the Jesuits, and suppressed all the priests, and if they didn't submit to the Protestant king, they were killed. And that same thing existed in early colonies in this country. Not so today. Roman Catholicism has liberty. They gained their liberty at the Declaration of Independence. After the Revolutionary War, they gained religious liberty, and they have systematically, ever so slowly, incrementally, taken over our country. They've done it without a fight. And now it's time for us to understand that we have a fifth column in this country, Roman Catholicism, that wants to overthrow Protestantism, the last vestige of Protestantism in the world right here in the United States of America. So far, we've been going peacefully through the ecumenical movement. I hate to repeat myself, but it's always worthy of repetition. We're going peacefully through the ecumenical movement. Those last holdouts for Christ will go by the sword. Rome never changes. And it says, but the grant of Ireland had another great repercussion. It provided a precedent to the popes, not only to claim and give away islands and peoples, but also to give away a new world. For the language of the grant of Hadrian IV and some of his successors developed principles as yet unheard of in Christendom, since Hadrian had declared that Ireland and all the islands belong to the special jurisdiction of St. Peter, the Pope of Rome. This was not a rhetorical expression. It became a solid reality when daring sailors began to discover lands in the until then uncharted oceans. When in 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, his finding not only stimulated a keener competition between the two adventurous Iberian seafaring nations, that would be Italy and probably Venice, but let's see, I lost my place here. It says, but opened up both Spain and Portugal tremendous vistas of territorial, economic, and political expansion. There you have territorial, economic, and political expansion. That was their goal for the Western Hemisphere. Political, territorial, and economic expansion. And we can see it if we know what to look for. The United States belongs lock, stock, and barrel to the papacy. The territory belongs to the papacy because of Christopher Columbus. It controls its economic machinery and also its political machinery. They control the politics, the economics, and the territory of this country, just as they always have. The authority of the papacy, as established by a forgery called the Donation of Constantine. Now, we're on Terra Firma USA in our discussion, and we'll continue with it tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Thanks for listening.